starting with Doug. The extraterritorial jurisdiction ordinance placed onto the town residents by the village appears to be moving towards a modification or removal by the village board. This is in part due to increased communication by the members of both boards and community input. The new village president has been open and honest in his desire to modify the ETJ, which is a huge step in getting past the poor relations shown in the last few years between the town and the village. If elected, how do you plan to further the collaboration between both communities for a common goal to be a better Waterford?
Good question. Obviously, we had a little time spent on the border agreement. I think a couple hundred hours, the three of us, myself, Tom, and Dale Berkey, and two village board members. We had a lot of good conversations on that. Were there a couple of boxes that weren't checked? Yes, the majority were. I think we need to go back with that. First, I'd like to commend the village president for talking about reducing it down to a 5 acre. I think that's a great step with working with us. The people that brought up and had issues with the border agreement, that's great, but what were their answers? How would they like us to move forward? They didn't really give us answers, just, we don't like that. Well, tell us what you don't like about it and how can we correct it? That would be the first step on trying to get the border agreement. And, you know, granted, we're still two different entities, but we agreed to work together as one Waterford. Like I had said a while back, a lot of people in the town don't know the difference between the town and the village. Simple way I tell them is, you have a 3-digit number, you're in the village. So we need to work together and try to combine services and move forward.
I know it's been touched on, but I think another good way we're so close, we have to work together, but, you know, everybody said grants, you know, we should probably have, I hesitate to say committee, but maybe a pairing between the village and the town of what grants we can get together that will help us all fit our needs. And I think that's a really good stepping stone. I commend them for wanting to take that 20-acre thing off. I think that was perfect because of the it was probably done as spite as from a former town chair a few chairs ago. And then I think that with a border agreement, we should, as a town, we should have more public input. That's when I started getting interested in this. There really wasn't a lot of information put out there. So again, with Facebook and everybody's got an opinion anonymously or whatever, I think there probably was a good fair amount of misinformation on the border agreement. I mean, and I think that's one of the things that clear communication on our side to our residents that this is what it is, and then maybe even have a public forum, get some input, and see how it helps us.
I believe that the boundary agreement is going to be essential for us to develop a plan for growth and initiate that plan going forward. It makes perfect sense to work more closely with the village, especially as you look to develop areas and land that are on the boundaries. This is as I understand in my research, it's a very common agreement that's done throughout Wisconsin with various municipalities that share borders. They want to have an organized approach towards development and growth. They want to have an organized approach to how they're going to work together to resolve issues as issues come up. So I think that alone makes this a very important agreement for us to look at again. I'd like to see it pass. Want to make sure that all the stakeholders involved have had a say, that we have more public input. I know the team that put it together in town was key in putting it together, really sought out a lot of public input, but I think it's important to revisit that with the public and see what other input we can get going forward.
So I'm going to start my answer with a rebuttal to Phil, because I would challenge back that there wasn't an opportunity for public input and opportunity to ask questions and get information. The boundary committee that worked for 2 years held 3, not required, but 3 community listening sessions that were not required by the state or anything, in the interest of increasing complete transparency around the work that was happening. These were held in a large group room at the high school, periodically during the course of the 2-year experience, where we had the opportunity for public to come in and ask questions, get information about how we were progressing through the agreement. And there was a state mandated public hearing that was held last February on it as well. So in terms of openness and communication and information shared and community input to the process, it was significant, in fact, more than was required, significantly more than was required by the state. So that said, I will echo what these other gentlemen are saying in terms of the importance of moving this forward. I want to commend President Jaski and the work that he's doing right now to address one of the issues that was addressed in the boundary agreement, but I will emphasize it was only one particular point of a boundary agreement that contained many, many different mutually beneficial elements to both the town and the village. And one of the key ones, and I'm going to read right from the slide from one of the listening sessions that we had, was the formation of a Waterford Joint Strategic Planning Committee. Establish an ongoing joint strategic planning committee between the town and the village that includes representatives from both, appointed by the town chair and the village president, accountable for oversight of the cooperative boundary plan, collaborative strategic planning on matters impacting and beneficial to the greater Waterford community, development of ideas to enhance Waterford's quality of life, optimize their services, reduce costs, and maximize efficiencies, proactive, transparent, constructive communication, and developing joint proposals that go to both the village board and the town board for mutually beneficial initiatives that benefit both communities. That is in the boundary plan proposal.
Boundary agreement, just so everybody knows, I've got my statement on the boundary agreement back here if you want to take it along and see it, because I can't spend that much time discussing it. Basically, the first thing to understand is what's a town, what's a village, and what does each have, and what is the responsibility of each. That is an important factor before you can even move forward. You got to understand where you're coming from before you can go forward. So I would encourage anybody that's interested in the border agreement to please do a little bit of homework. My statement is on the back table here for anybody to read.
All right, back to you, Phil. This dovetails a little bit on the boundary stuff, the next few questions. So some of these you might be able to give a little shorter answer possibly, I'm hoping. Do you support the boundary agreement in its current form? If not, what modifications do you see necessary and why?
For the most part, I think it was a good thing. Maybe Tom, you could ask this. Was it a 40 or 50 year? It was 50, right?
Right, by concept, the state designs these to be long-term, multi-decade agreements.
So I thought 50 years was a long time, just in my opinion. I mean, that's almost like generational. But for the most part, I think it was a good plan. I mean, there was a few minor things, but hey, nothing's perfect. So I just think, and back to what Tom was saying, it was a 2-year process, but I started getting involved, started going to town, and I was only a year probably into this. And again, I went to some meetings, I was very curious on what the PD was doing, and it was just basically not a lot at the meeting. And again, it goes back with, maybe if we had a better Facebook page or a better website that the commoner could have educated themselves a little bit on. So I'll keep my answer short.
I think for the most part, as it's written and developed, it's a great agreement. Is there anything that I would add to that agreement? I think I'd probably look to ensure that there is a mechanism in place, and it perhaps sounds like it might be, as Tom read off some of the bullet points, of how does the town and the village collaborate going forward. You know, I think by engaging in this agreement, it's a huge step forward, and it reduces a lot of the past that I believe existed here in the town and the village with some of the animosities between the two municipalities. So I'd like to see less animosity. I'd like to see more collaboration, and I would hope that this agreement would be a catalyst to develop that further.
Yeah, I would say that if the extraterritorial jurisdiction issue is addressed outside of the boundary agreement, I think there's probably an element in there that can be taken out with respect to the town's focus on incorporation or potential incorporation. Beyond that, there are significant benefits within this boundary agreement. I wouldn't take anything else out. I've read just one of the things in terms of the Joint Strategic Planning Committee that existed. There could be other things that could be put in the boundary agreement and memorialized within there in terms of other collaboration. We've touched on some of these, you know, already up here in terms of further sharing and resource collaboration at the public works level or within the court system or other areas of municipal government that are duplicative across the town and the village and might be shared or optimized if we did more in that regard. There's lots of opportunity to add more things in. We specifically stayed away from some of those things because either it was heavy enough the way that it was, or you know, there were other viewpoints on some of that. But I think that largely the things that are in the boundary agreement as it had been defined, aside from those couple things that I mentioned, if they were taken care of ahead of time, that would remain.
I think the work that this group did on that border agreement was outstanding. I've lived through border agreements in other towns. In particular, the town of Lisbon was stopped from doing what they wanted to do by the village of Sussex. It's a difficult process to get it done. And these gentlemen and the gentleman from the village worked extensively to come up with a solid agreement. Did both parties get what they want? No. But it's a starting point to move forward, and I am all for what is currently there, and then things can be worked out in the future if need be.
I echo Tom's opinion on that. The committee was added to that so there would be feedback in case they wanted to change it, where both municipalities agreed to it, they could. The other good thing was most border agreements, after the term of the agreement, the land that was going to be designated possibly in the village would go to the village. In ours, it would go back to the town if it wasn't annexed in. The only thing I think maybe we could revisit would be possibly how many years. It was originally a 50-year agreement, which I was for. We did change, I believe, to 40 years. I heard a lot of complaints that it should have been shorter. Maybe that's the only thing that we could maybe revisit. Other than that, there's a lot more stuff we could put into it when we sit back down again.
All right, Bill, next question. Have you built any relations with members of the village board, and have you shown any collaborative efforts with any of them? And if so, please describe.
That's a great question. Yes, recently have developed a relationship with some of the members of the village board, Adam Jeske and his previous town administrator. Worked with them very closely. I mentioned earlier I'm a member of the WWMD, the APM community, and we had an issue this last summer where we lost our offload site for our weed harvesting operations. And we put out a call for help. And I can tell you that one of the first responders was the village, was Adam Jeske and his team. They said that they had some property available to us next to Spanky's, and they allowed us to dump some weeds there. So that was great, and that was the start of a good, communication between the WWMD and the village. And then another example that occurred was later in the summer, we had the flooding. And there was a lot of big debris, trees and so forth floating down the river. And again, we reached out for help. And I was very pleased to see that both the town and the village stepped up and said, hey, we're here to help. If you're gonna do a debris removal service and have somebody come in to do that, we'd be happy to do a little cost sharing with the WWMD, which the town and the village did, and we initiated that. So yeah, I'm excited going forward. I think the village has a good board, and I'd like to get to know them better if I'm elected to this position.
Yeah, great question. Adam, I would just call you out and say that one of the best and most satisfying blessings for me in working for 2 years with you and the other folks from the village on this was the relationship that we established. And my respect for you as a leader and the work that you're doing is outstanding. So thank you. I have had the opportunity to work with Adam, with his team, with other members of the village board on this boundary agreement and on the work that Bill just mentioned with respect to the WWMD collaboration, where the community truly banded together to address some significant crisis issues that were happening on the waterway at the time, and everybody pitched in, everybody supported the work that needed to be done, and it was outstanding. So I feel very good about the relationships that I have built with the village leadership. And I feel that that is reciprocated, there is mutual respect. Do we always agree? No, we don't. But any disagreement or things that we need to work through are done in a very, very positive, productive, collaborative way where everyone is seeking mutual win-win solutions that benefit both communities and the greater Waterford area overall. That is special, and it's something that we could build on significantly more than we have up to this point, and I would like to see that happen.
I have not done a lot with the village. However, I've done a lot with community, the village of and the town of. From food drives, which the town got behind, which the village got behind. Currently, we are working on a educational event having to do with sexual exploitation. The village has been outstanding in helping promote that, as is the town. So I've made contacts with certain members of the village, and I really am encouraged by their openness to discuss things in an open, fair manner, and listen, and I listen, and we put things together. That's the way it should work. Community.
Thank you. Obviously, being on the committee, I worked with Mr. Chasky, Don Houston, great people to work with. We had a lot of hours and we didn't always agree, but we left there and we had a mutual understanding on where we were going to be. I talked several times with Troy McReynolds, talked to people who are on the village police committee now, and I think there's going to be, moving forward, we will be having a mutual joint meeting with them in the near future. So yeah, and other board members, I know them from being around the area for quite a few years.
Well, here's gonna be a different answer. No. Not that I, like I said, I never really held a political office before this. I didn't really member of a school board or anything like that, so no, I've not dealt with or had any dealings with the village board. But I'm sure watching their meetings, they seem like they're a fine bunch of people and they got their act together, so I could easily see them being easy to work with.
All right. Next question. Would you support the town and the village as one municipality? Yes or no? Why is that your position? And what would be the advantage for both communities to to do so or not do so?
So I think it's premature at this point in time to say the town and the village are going to be combined as one municipality. I think that if we project long term, and we just look at many of our neighbors and neighboring communities, it may be an inevitability that will happen sometime in the distant future. But is today the time to do that? I don't think we're ready. I think we have an awful lot of work to do on our own, in the town, and on opportunities to collaborate with the village, as we've talked about multiple times already tonight, without saying that we're going to put the stake in the ground and merge into one. So my position is I am all for increasing the opportunity to work together with the village and doing real, meaningful, long-lasting, significant work together for the betterment of the greater Waterford community. And let's see if and what kind of momentum builds from that and where it might go. But my answer, if someone said yes or no, my answer would be, as of today, my answer is no. But all those other points wrap into that.
I echo what Tom says. However, I have stated publicly, and I got a mission statement back there as far as this goes. Doug raised an interesting point when he said a Class A city, Class 4 city. So, you know, the world is changing. Money's tight. Is it going to get better? We don't know, but we should never shut the door to what we have to do moving forward. And if that's 5 years down the road, 10, 15, so be it. But let's not close the door at this moment to even start simple discussions. Doesn't have to be in detail, doesn't have to be anything, but for me to sit here and say, what's the benefit? What's the drawback? I would have personal opinions on that, but that isn't the way this should be done. It takes a village and it takes a town to decide when, where, and how. So that's my opinion on it.
We actually spent a couple meetings at the border agreement discussing whether we should drop the border agreement and look at forming a city, and it was decided at that time not to. Are there advantages? Probably. I don't know for sure. It would be nice to look at it. That's why I brought up possibly having a non-binding referendum. What do the people in our municipality want? It might overwhelmingly be voted, no, we don't want to, or it might surprise us and say yes. I don't know. It would be a good way just to get a feel of what the people in the area want. Like I said, the border agreement committee did spend at least 2 or 3 meetings on it, and there was a lot of discussion. In fact, we even talked to the state on it. And we decided at that time to move forward with the border agreement.
I'm gonna go with, I like that our town. I'm all for working real closely with the village. You know, we can be mutual beneficial, but I feel like bigger is not always better. And I don't think the city would benefit us right now at all, the city of Waterford. And I feel like we should concentrate helping us ourselves as a town, and work with the village and just move forward. But I am not in favor of making a city of Waterford.
It's a great topic. I think it's one that really requires a lot more research and analysis before formal decisions can be made. Right now we have approximately 6,500 citizens in the town of Waterford. I'm not quite sure what's in the village for population. I'm not sure if we looked at combining that and then looked at all the resources and assets and things that we would have between the two municipalities. What would that look like? What would it do to everybody's taxes? I mean, that's kind of first and foremost, we have to look at that and have that in our minds. like many have said, and I've said it up here as well, I'm all about collaboration. I think it makes sense to explore a better collaboration for perhaps one police department. It makes sense perhaps to look at collaboration as costs continue to rise and labor continues to rise, and it's hard to find good skilled labor for the fire department. Does that make sense to possibly have a collaboration there? Tom's mentioned DPW. I think they looked at that earlier in the year. We have a great DPW department here in the town. I know they have a great one in the village. So I think all those things could be on the table and should be discussed and reviewed. But I think at this juncture, at this time, it's very hard to say yes or no. For me, it's a maybe. For me, I'd like to explore it further. I'd like to better understand overall costs and sharing and impact to the tax base.
All right. Dave, you're first one up here. Would you support a non-binding advisory referendum to ask the residents if the village or town should seriously look at forming the city of Waterford? Some of these questions kind of go together, guys. So.
I believe I answered that. I don't know if we're ready right now, but if the town residents would feel that way at this point, yeah, referendum. That's the only way to do it, to get the actual residents' input.
I believe I sort of answered that on the last round, so thank you.
Fair enough. Just reading them as I have them.
A non-binding referendum would be awesome. I mean, I think that's the ultimate public opinion. I mean, and I think everybody should have their chance to have their opinion heard. So yes, I would support a non-binding referendum.
Yeah, from my perspective, again, I refer back to more analysis and data, research to be done, put that all out to the public so the public can be well informed, and then have the referendum so that people have more information before they vote on such things. But I think it would be a good thing to have a referendum once we have the information out to the public and have discussion with the public on it.
So I agree with Bill. I think getting more information is important, and then I would absolutely support the non-binding referendum. More important than information, though, I think there's significant opportunities for demonstrated wins, demonstrated collaboration, real, meaningful, integrated work together that actually is visible to the community, as opposed to a theoretical idea of saying, hey, what would you think about? We don't have anything to go off of right now, and if we had some of that demonstrated actual real work having been completed with some miles behind us, with some wins and experiences of what worked and what maybe didn't work, I think that would go a much longer way to actually being a catalyst to have such a referendum.